Well, so you guys are familiar with what this is, right? These are arrows. Come on, these are. There we go. It's the audience participation. This is a big deal about Phos, is the audience participation. And what you may not know, if you've not been here before, is that if you don't participate, I could start the whole message all over again. And this could go on and on and on. So you really just want to kind of, just they're arrows, baby. You want to get with the program, because if you're not with the program, then the program could go on for a long, long time. And so you can have a short sermon or you can have a long sermon. So it's up to you. Participate is shorter. Okay, it's a tip. So if the sermon's too long, Mike, it's because you didn't participate. You don't. Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? I could. By the way, speaking of firing at people, I need someone who's willing to put an apple on top of their head. I've got some volunteers. You guys are crazy. Not with me shooting. I mean, there might be somebody in here that could shoot that way, but you don't want me shooting nothing anywhere close to you. Basketballs, arrows, nothing, because it's not working out so good. And all right, baby, you crazy woman. That's certifiable right there. This is called an English bow. This is an English bow. This is what you're most familiar with. These obviously are arrows, and we're in a series called The Last Arrow. It's built around this book by Erwin Raphael McManus called The Last Arrow. Now, some of you, I know, have already started reading this. How many of you guys have already started reading it? Raise your hands high. Be proud. Come on now. How many of you guys are loving it? Keep your hands up if you're loving it. Man, it's powerful. It's so good. It's going to help you, right, Rusty? It's really, really good, and he just unpacks some things that are really powerful. Between now and February 4th, I'm going to be preaching through roughly this book. I'm not going to preach word for word and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to take some concepts each week and unpack them. You can really grow faster, better, deeper if you'll grab a copy of the book and read it, and then participate in the messages, and then follow on with a little book club I'm going to experiment with. I don't know if it'll work or not, but a little book club will happen on midweek. And if you've got the Phos Church app, there's a link to sign up for the book club and all that. And you may not be able to physically be present on the book club when it actually happens, but you can get the replay if you go ahead and sign up, if that makes sense. So you may not be able to be on when we do it, but if you're not on, you can still look at the replay. It's just going to give you more content. Going to give you more than I can do from the platform, if that makes sense. Okay, it's a way to follow on. It's a way for you to go deeper, further, stronger than you can alone. So, The Last Arrow, Erwin Raphael McManus. These bows and arrows, this archery thing has become very popular in our culture lately, hasn't it? Archery is one of the fastest growing sports in high schools in America right now. And what are some movies that have featured arrows? Hunger Games, yeah. Okay, there's one. And what's cool about that one is, this really like it. These young ladies on the front row, I love these guys. They're important. It's a young lady that really is featured in that movie, and I think it's important. And the writers, producers make an important statement that women are very powerful and can participate in what they're called to do as well. And matter of fact, in ancient history related to bows and arrows, the Mongols, who were notorious for having great archers and great arrows and great technology, which I'll get to in just a moment, they actually had women riding with them. They would take women who were great archers and they would ride with them, and they were really powerful warriors. And the Mongols were a force to be reckoned with, not one you'd want to run into on any given day. Where else have we seen arrows and archers lately in movies? The Great Wall. I've not seen that. Is that about China? Okay, is it the Mongols? No? Okay, I don't know anything about it. Are you messing with me? Oh, shoot you. If Matt Damon's in it today, I should have seen it. I mean, at least according to Julie. I don't like him that much. But Robin Hood. Yeah, Robin Hood, of course, that one. Any other movies? Dances with Wolves. Yeah, okay. Cool, yeah. Lord of the... Oh, yeah. All in there, all up in there. The Lord of the Rings actually is probably a good platform for us to operate from, because how ancient that seems. Somebody said something back here. Pocahontas, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's another one I've not seen, but hey, okay. Okay. All right. I stand corrected. I have seen it. I just don't remember it. Okay. I stand corrected most of the time. So. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. So these bows, arrows, history, movies, it's important. And, this English bow is what we're most familiar with. The Mongols I mentioned a while ago, who were incredible warriors and who could shoot you from over 300 yards away, had arrows that were shorter than these, and they were they could even shoot you while they were riding on their horse. Their bows were shorter. They used a compound bow, and I'm going to bring up a couple in just a moment, Alan and Ann, and who have some brand new technology related to bows and arrows. But the Mongols had developed a compound bow system that was more curved than this, much more almost like a circle, and the draw strength on it was so strong that they could shoot you from over 300 yards away. And they were so good, they could ride on horseback, and while they're galloping, they can shoot you. Now, that's really scary. And they wouldn't miss. You know what I'm saying? They practiced this a lot. And what they would do, the way they could shoot you that way is that they would wait as a horse is galloping, it has kind of an up and down motion. They would wait till the horse was on glide, like when all four hooves are up. When the horse was up, that's when they would, and they had a short drawstring, and bam, 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 and they could shoot. They would carry 30, 40 arrows, and then they would just pick up the enemy's arrows and shoot them right back at you. I mean, they were really fearsome people. The arrow has been a major part of history for a long time. And in the story that we're going to unpack today, it's important too. Ann and Alan, suppley, or men, supply. It's Frenchmen. Come on, French people. Come on up here. And these guys have some incredible technology related to arrows and bows and that sort of thing. And we're glad they're hanging out with us here at Phos. And when I saw this book and started this series, I thought of Ann and Alan and thought, man, they need to come help us with this technology just a little bit, and tell us a little bit about bows and arrows in modern times. There's this great history of bows and arrows and what they are, but these guys have the latest, greatest, coolest technology, and they just put a few of their arrows out in the crowd. I want you to take a look at those, feel how light they are, get those in your hands. Just once you've got it, just pass it around, take a look at it, pass it on. This is show and tell for a few minutes here, so you all can get a feel of what an arrow feels like. Because some of you may have never. How many of you guys have never held an arrow in your hand before? Has anybody never held one? How many of you guys have held one? Let's see it that way. Oh, good. So you're pretty familiar. Okay, I just didn't know if you were city slickers or not, so I wasn't sure. So Alan and Ann, tell us some about these arrows that you just passed out. Tell us what's going on with those. What are those arrows about?
The arrows we got right here are some that we just got in, and I'm building them for our tournament season this year. They do not have a point in them, so they're not completed. They don't have vanes on them. So they wouldn't fly very far right now if you tried to shoot them about 20 yards. 20, 25 yards, be consistent accuracy with it. But there's a lot of different ways that we build our arrows depending upon what we're going to set up for. If I'm looking for speed, actually I've got another set of dozen at home that I'm going to get a little more speed out of it with those. Those are going to be a little stiffer. I'm going to have a more point weight in it, which is going to break the spine down.
Okay, so for a minute. Now, Ann, I know you studied this. So here's an arrow. Come tell us the different parts of the arrow. So,
this is the arrowhead. This is the shaft. This is the crest where the label would be.
Okay.
This is the fletching, and this is the knock. And this is where you put in your bowstring. And so this is what's going towards your target. All
right. So now tell us what you're going to do to make your arrows even better, because these are really cool. You've got some really cool stuff going on there.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that I do with this. I could take the vanes, basically about where you have them right here. I can go to a little bit smaller vane if I use more point weight. Therefore, I can go with a lower profile vane, shorter vane, or also actually move the vane back further onto the shaft to where it's a lot closer to the knock.
This is straight, and you can also do them helical and spiral.
As what she's saying here is the vane is actually glued on to where it's completely straight up and down, or you can shoot an offset where the vane is slightly put onto the shaft at an angle, or you can run a strong helical. And a good way to really, for you all to really think about a good strong helical, you know what a boat prop looks like, right? So if you actually looked at the back here, your vanes would simulate of what a boat prop would look like. And the thing about that is you can get more accuracy having a helical. It's going to slow your arrow down a little bit the further it gets out. But you can also put too much of a helical on it, and as the arrow gets too far out, it's going to be like a parachute. It's going to get out so far, and that parachute's going to open up, and the arrow's just going to bottom out. It's just going to fall right off the shelf, and you're going to lose some distance.
So if I wanted to shoot further straighter, I just keep them straight up and down like this?
Yes, sir.
But if I want to be shorter, tighter target, I would do the helical, right?
And that also goes a lot with testing and tuning. Basically, if you look, a lot of people will run a lot of helical if we're going to be shooting within 50 yards. But there's also a lot of games that is played where out in Redding, California, where they'll shoot animals out to 100 yards. Actually, it's 101. And they'll run a lot smaller vanes and also lower profile, and they'll be more straight up. They might have a little bit of an offset, but...
Well, tell me about, in the history, there's a couple of things going on with the arrow. When the traditional longbow people, the ones who were shooting this, were shooting arrows that were about 36 inches long. The Mongols cut their arrows down to 26 inches. They could shoot further. Why is that? What's up?
It can and it can't.
No, it did.
No,
It's
it
not a
did,
can or
yes.
can't.
But they...
It's not a can or can. It did, so just tell me about that.
Well, for that particular archer, it probably
also,
did.
Yeah.
For that particular archer, it did. Now, it wouldn't work on a person who has a longer...
No, but I'm saying the Mongols...
Because you got to look at mass.
Yeah.
You got to look at mass is what they had. They had flint or bone or something as a field point, and it was probably pretty heavy. So it's what that did. That therefore made up like a little bit added length of arrows, because it's just like rolling a 5-pound ball or rolling a 20-pound ball. That 20-pound ball is going to roll further with mass.
Okay.
So it actually goes in the same principle.
Okay. Yeah, so the Mongols, they had this technology was very weak compared to what they did. So when they came from the west to the east, began to be in wars, they could stand 100 yards further back and inflict damage than we could. So it was technology. There was a lot of technology in the arrows, and the arrows and the technology of the bows determined who would win those battles. So kingdoms rose and fall based around the arrow.
Right.
It's crazy. Crazy, very important stuff.
But mass plays a lot with it.
So you guys are figuring out how to get the mass way down, how to get your arrows super technical. This is really
with speed.
With speed, and you're a target shooter. You're really good at this.
I try to be.
Yeah. And Anne's along for the ride. She says, but you're shooting too, right?
Yes, I shoot.
She shoots really good.
Really?
Don't let her fool you.
Okay.
I watch my P's and Q's at home.
Okay. Yeah. So would you recommend that we shoot our wives to shoot, or not so much?
If you like to live on the edge.
So get out on the edge if you want to teach your wife how to shoot one of these things. So what is the most fascinating thing about arrows to each of you? We'll wrap up with that. What's the most fascinating thing about arrows based on what you're doing now and what you...
It can make or break you.
How do you mean?
You can actually get all the speed that you want. And at home or whatever, be home shooting, practicing with them, getting everything just right. But if you have them too light, you're shooting amongst a group. Like, say, for instance, there's 3 of us here, and we're all shooting at an animal, and we're shooting at the 12 ring or so forth.
Okay, let me clarify. Some people are now getting...
Foam.
Thank you. It's a foam animal. Before you all call PETA and say, our church is saying we should go out and shoot animals.
Foam.
Okay. But for the hunters, it's a real animal. Whatever you want to believe is all good.
So as we're shooting at the 12 ring, 12 rings an inch and a quarter, and you two are all stacked in it. Well, I've got my arrow. It's got a lot of speed, and it's really light, and it's really stiff, really flying good. But you all are already in the 12, and I shoot, and I hit the back of one of your all's arrows. I'm probably going to have more of a tendency that if it doesn't really glance off slightly and stay in it or stay in a 10, more than likely when you hit one, it could glance you out as far as a 5.
So away from the target.
Away from the target, okay. Yes. And basically what we're talking about as far as a glance out is I have shot, this is Anne's, I hit the back of her arrow, and it completely glances you out.
Well, why don't you shoot it so it knocks her arrow out?
Do what?
Why don't you shoot it so that it knocks her arrow out?
Well, hers is already in the 12, so
okay.
Yeah, it's already in.
All right.
Just
messing with you.
The best I could do is actually try to Robin Hood it.
And what would that be?
We both get 12s.
Yeah, we
Okay,
both.
well, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you love most about arrows and this as you've gotten into it, begin to learn?
Overall, what I love about it is just that we can do it together and that we've met incredible people along the way, all across the different states.
So being out here in these tournaments and these things that you do has been good. So archery, arrows, what a history, and maybe a future. If you want to know more about all that, then Ann and Alan will be available after service. Thank you all so much. Thanks for giving us a little history on arrows and arrow tech and all that. So all you want to know about an arrow, you can get right there. And it's fun. I'll get rid of that one. So I grew up around arrows and things. My dad was a hunter. And these are actually arrows that my dad has given to my son. And so these arrows have been around for a long time. Unlike Ann and Alan's really cool new stuff, this is really cool old stuff because I'm old now. And so these were around when I was a teenager. And learned to shoot a little bit, not very well, but did learn to shoot. And generally speaking, when an arrow should be put in the bow, and then what do you do with it? You draw it, and then you let it go, and then it flies. So we agree that you shoot arrows, right? We shoot arrows, okay. Until you see this amazing story in the Old Testament, and it begins to be a little bit different. So I want you to hear this story from the Old Testament, from 2 Kings. Look at this with me. Pull this up on the screen for me. And let's dive into this story. There's a prophet named Elijah. Elijah was powerful. He was so powerful that when Elijah was buried, he was dead and buried, that there was an enemy army coming into the region where he had been buried, and there was another person that had been injured and killed in the battle. And they just needed to get the body out of the way. So they took the body and threw it on top of Elisha's body. And when this dead person's body hit Elisha's bones, the legend is that the person came to life and started walking around. That's how powerful Elisha was and how powerful Elisha was used in the hands of God. And it turns out that in Old Testament times, in that period of history, that the prophets of God had a lot to say about battles. And had a lot to say to kings about whether they would win or whether they would lose, how they should fight a battle, whether they should fight a battle. And Elisha was no exception. He was the king's advisor. So you've got arrows, which make a big difference in your battle and in your battle plan. You have a prophet named Elisha, in this case, who's speaking to the king about his battle plan and about how things should be done. And Elisha is nearing the end of his life when we pick up this passage. And we hear this story, an exchange between a king who wants to win a battle because battles mattered, because battles meant you still had kingdom if you won. It also meant that you got marched away or even killed if you lost. So it was important to win, right? Important to win. And sometimes in life, you're going to face battles where it's important to win. Here's what I know. Some of you are facing battles right now in your life that you didn't even sign up for. You're having a battle with your health, or with your finances, or with your spouse, or with a child, or with addiction. You're having battles. It's important to know how to win, isn't it? It's important to know how to be with God in the midst of the battles that we face in life. And so this is going to be an important series for you and for me as we hear from God about what he might want to say to you. I honestly don't know which part of today's message is going to be most pivotal for you, but I do know if you're facing any kind of challenge in your life, or think you might someday in your life face a challenge, that there's important news in this story for you. So, here we go. Now, when Elisha had fallen sick with the illness of which he was to die, Joash, king of Israel, went down to him and wept before him, crying, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. So this king is upset. And he's real upset because this person of God, this prophet who's been helping him, is now about to die. And Elisha said to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. And then he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow. And he drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the hands of the king's hands. And he said, open the window. And he opened it. And Elisha said, shoot. And the king shot. And the prophet said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria. For you shall fight the Syrians in Aphek until you have made an end of them. This is a pretty good saying, right? This is the kind of news a king wants to get from a prophet about what's going to happen. You're going to fight the Syrians at Aphek, and you're going to fight them until you make an end of them, till you win. And this is the kind of news we want to hear, right? Right. So this all makes sense so far. So you got a bow, you got arrows, you shot it out a window, and the prophet's making a prophecy, which is what prophets do, that you're going to win, you're going to fight, and all that stuff. And he said, take the arrows. And he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them. And he struck 3 times. And he stopped. Okay, now, let's just park here for a minute. Can you admit with me, is that a weird thing for the prophet to ask you to do? Like the shooting thing I get, okay? Get the arrow, shoot the arrow. That makes sense. Then the prophet says, take the arrows and strike the ground. Does that make any sense? Really? I mean, how many of you guys think that makes sense? Raise your hands. Like, oh, that's what you do with arrows. You strike the ground with the arrows. It doesn't make sense. The king struck the ground 3 times and he stopped. Now watch what happens next. Then the man of God was angry with him. And he said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Syria until you had made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 3 times. Now this is troubling news. At first it all sounded good. Then he says, strike the ground. King said, all right, I did that. I struck the ground. He struck it 3 times. And then the man of God is mad. Why is he mad? Why is he mad? He's mad because the king stopped. The point that Erwin makes in his book, and I think he might be right, is that sometimes God asks us to do things that don't make a lot of sense. And sometimes he asks us to strike the arrows, and how long are we supposed to strike them? This is like Simon Says, until God says, what? Stop. Because if God tells you to do something, how long are you supposed to do it? Until God tells you to stop. It doesn't make sense to strike arrows. I get it. I mean, it's like, that is the weirdest, dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, all the other stuff we're talking about is cool technology, and shoot the arrows, and you got special fletching, and the little feather things, that's fletching on the back and all that, and it's really cool and awesome. But to strike arrows on the ground, it doesn't make sense to start with, and then I only struck it 3 times, and so the man of God is mad. And he says, basically what he's saying to the king, because you didn't keep striking, you're going to be in this battle forever. It's going to be a perpetual battle. It's going to go over and over and over and over again. So the question in your mind probably is, so what? What difference does that make for me in this new year, in 2018? Here's the difference. In my experience with humans, including myself, our number one tendency is to quit too soon, is to stop short, is to give up. When God asks us to do something that doesn't make sense, sometimes we won't attempt it at all. And if we attempt it, we will attempt it only for a short time. And if anyone gives us any opposition at all, if anything seems hard at all, then our tendency is to quit. If I could encourage anything in you right now, for most of you, the reason you haven't had the success in life you want to have, the reason you've not accomplished the objectives you intend to accomplish, the reason you're still fighting the same battle you've been fighting for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years is because you just haven't finished the deal. You haven't kept fighting. You gave up a long time ago. For whatever reason, you gave up. You stopped. This is the number one epidemic in America is the epidemic of quitting. If I could help you as a follower of Jesus to quit quitting, we would get a whole lot more done. Me too. I'm not just pointing fingers. I'm saying, that's me too. We all have to learn how to keep going even when it's hard. We got to keep going even when it doesn't make sense. We got to do what God has called us to do even when we don't like what he's asked us to do. I like the simple idea of shooting the arrow at the window. That makes sense to me. Striking arrows on the ground, it doesn't make. Does that make sense to you? That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what is this about? And I don't know. Except for this. This is how God has done things in history. God is looking for empowered partners. God is looking for people who will do what he's called them to do and that won't quit, that won't back up, that won't back down, that won't stop, that will keep going even when it's tough. They don't stop. God seeks empowered partners who won't quit to accomplish his plans. Now, that's not just in this story. This is how the Bible works. This is how the story of God's people works, is that God invites people into his story. He asks them to do things that are difficult. We just came out of the Christmas season, right? So when he comes to Mary and he asks her, or tells her, hey, you're going to be pregnant with this child, and how can that be? You know, I'm a virgin, he needed somebody who would say yes, right? And then he needed somebody that would not quit. Because was Mary going to endure a journey? Yeah. When Moses, in the wilderness, when Moses comes to a burning bush, you remember Moses, right? Comes to a burning bush, and God invites him into the drama of releasing the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Was Moses going to face a journey? Yes. Was it likely that there would be times when he would want to quit? Matter of fact, the Bible records some of those times when he's like, I'm done with this. I do not want to do this. So I want to take you, I want you to think about this. God uses people who will partner with him and who won't quit. Now, let me say this, some parentheses on this. There are times when you should quit some things. There are some things in your life right now that you need to quit. Okay, so I'm not saying you don't ever quit anything, but the thing you need to keep doing is the thing that God has called you to do. You keep doing what God has called you to do, what he's called you into. So one of my favorite verses of all times that I memorized back in my college days was really this, in 2 Chronicles 16:9, and it says this: For the eyes of the Lord reigns throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully his. He's looking all over the earth to strengthen those who are fully committed to him. Do you know that God is looking for you right now? If you're fully committed to him, and if you're called to do something amazing in your life, something that God wants you to do, he's looking for you, and he wants to strengthen you. He wants to do something great in your life. He wants to give you power to do what he's called you to do. He does not want you to shrink back. He wants you to keep going on, even when you feel like quitting. He wants you to keep moving forward. Does this make sense? This is how God does his work in the world. 2 Chronicles 16:9. He's looking. Who's it going to be? Whose heart is going to be strong enough to say yes to me? And then who will partner with me and allow me to do my work through them? And part of what I think that the prophet Elisha was looking for in King Joash was a spirit of a person who would not quit too soon, who would not quit too easily, who would not quit when the battle got hard. It's interesting. You think about the story of Elijah and Joash in a battle that's impending and this thing they're in. Is it possible that God could have sent a message to Elijah that would have went like this? Oh, listen, King Joash, tell you what, you just stay in the palace, eat some pineapples, have a good party, grill some steaks, hang out here at the palace, and God's just going to wipe out the Syrians for you. You've got to do nothing. Now, that's the kind of story we want, right? When we pray to God, that's what we want, right? We want a story that doesn't really involve us. We want a story that God just does things. He just clears the path for us. That's the kind of prayers I've prayed a lot. God, could you just handle this for me? Could you just do this for me and let me just stay back in the palace where I don't have to get my hands dirty or bloody, or I don't have to work. I don't have to sweat. I don't have to persevere. I don't have to keep on keeping on. I want you just to do what you're going to do, God, and leave me out of it. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but my bet is that you've prayed those kinds of prayers too. God, just deal with it so I don't have to deal with it. But that wasn't how Elisha did it, was it? He said, shoot the arrow, and then he said, strike the arrows, and he's looking for the heart of a king that would not quit. And I got to ask you, what kind of person are you? Are you a person that quits? You have to be honest if you're going to get well. If you have historically been a quitter, it's time to quit quitting. Keep going. Keep moving. If God has called you to something, don't you back down. Don't you quit, Rusty, even when it's hard. Don't you quit. Rusty leads an amazing ministry. Hard sometimes, though, isn't it, Rusty? But don't you quit until God tells you to. If God tells you to, quit. But if he doesn't tell you to, then you keep doing what God has called you to do. Keep striking the arrows, because God allows us to participate in our own rescue and what he wants to do, where he's always inviting us to participate in it. Rarely does God just step in and wipe the slate clean and do everything for us. Most of the time, in the history of the Bible, he invites us to participate. I'm going to put a list of characters up here that I want you to consider. Adam. Think about him. God creates a garden in Eden, and he has Adam. And he invites Adam to do what in the garden? Work. I would rather just be a garden that you just get to hang out in. But no, I mean, the naked part was cool. But you still had to work. I mean, sorry, ladies, the guys are all with me on that, though. Okay, so there's still work involved. There's still this thing involved of working. We get to work. We're going to work. We're going to work. And then he invites Noah. And this is crazy stuff about Noah. Why didn't God just give him a boat? Why didn't God just give him a boat? And then you think about this. 2 by 2, all the animals in the world on a boat. Now, after a few days of those animals eating, and then who's going to clean that up? I mean, imagine that Noah had a shovel with the boat. I mean, lots of shovels maybe. Because God, sometimes he tells you, hey, this is going to be a challenge. There's a flood coming. You need to build a boat, and then you need to get your family, get all these animals 2 by 2, and then, these animals are going to do what they do in your boat, and guess what? You got to clean up the boat. That doesn't sound like a ride I want. That's not the cruise ship I signed up for. God, I don't want to be on that cruise ship. I want to be on one where they just feed me, not where I feed them and take care of them and do that. But God has this way of inviting us into the rescue of the world and to changing the world through us. He invites you into the world to do something amazing with your life. And if you really want your life to take the shape it could take, then you find out what you're wired to do. And then you ask God, what do you want me to do with this? And then you go, do it. But this was the process of Noah and then Abraham. Abraham, leave the country that you know all about. Now you're going to go to a country that you've never seen before. I'll tell you when you get there, so just take off, and then you do that. So you've got that happening with Moses, with Abraham, and then Moses, we mentioned a while ago, then David and Daniel, and then Jesus. Scripture, the Bible, rolls back the clouds of heaven and tells us what Jesus did. That Jesus took off the robes of glory. He took off his godness. He took off the creator of the universeness. And he humbles himself and he comes to earth born to a virgin in a manger in a stall as a baby, nothing more humble or powerless than that. And he participates in God's plan to save the world. And friends, I know that sometimes you feel tempted to quit. Do you reckon Jesus ever maybe felt tempted to quit? Do you reckon maybe he did? Did anyone face anything tougher than that ever? I don't know. I don't think so. Hebrews 12 tells us we should consider Jesus, who's the author and perfecter of our faith, who endured the cross for the glory that was set before him. He did not quit. He kept striking. Now, you know that Jesus never struck other people. The way of the cross, the way of Jesus, is not a way of anger and bitterness and battle. Not the battles that we're used to. It's a spiritual battle. It's not a battle of wiping other people out, but it is a battle of persevering in your spirit and of following through on what God has called you to do and not quitting. Please, in 2018, if you could make one resolution and keep it, would be this: quit quitting. Quit quitting. Stop quitting. Don't quit anymore. Keep going till God himself tells you to stop. You keep going. So Jesus exhibited that for us of keeping on. Of course, there's Paul and there's Peter, and then there's you. I hope there's you. I hope that you will be one of those people as God looks out over you today, that God is looking to strengthen those whose hearts are completely his. That he's looking for you. And he's asking you, will you be the one? Will you be the one? Will you be the one? Will you hear my words? Will you do what I've asked you to do? Will you keep on? Will you keep striking? Shoot and strike and do not quit. Shoot and strike and do not quit. Keep on, keep on, keep on. You see, here's what we know. Here's how you live a life as an empowered partner with God. Micah 6:8 teaches us this, that we should walk with God. The only way you know what God wants you to do is you walk with him. You learn to hear from him. You learn to listen to him. And then you need wisdom. And the book of James tells us we can ask for wisdom and God will give it to us. So you need to walk with God and you need to have wisdom. And then you got to work. And that work is, man, you got to shoot and strike and shoot and strike. And if you wonder if that's just an Old Testament concept, you need to check out what Jesus said in the parable of the talents in Luke 25, when he's issued talents to people and to workers. And he said to them, listen, I'm going to give you these things. I want you to work with what I'm giving you. The person that Jesus tells the story about that gets blasted is one who didn't do anything, the one who quit. It's the one who quit that Jesus had problems with. The one who played it safe is the one who Jesus had problems with. It wasn't the ones who kept shooting and striking and going and serving and doing what they could. It was the quitter that Jesus blasted. I know this is hard. It's a hard concept because as Jesus followers, we're taught, you should be meek and mild and tender, and those are true. But inside of that, the spiritual resolve that Jesus exhibited of going to a cross, of not battling with people, but of bearing the weight of what God called him to do and not quitting, that's the way we are to live. As people who keep going, who keep moving. I know you're facing challenges right now. I know some of you are looking at a 2018 that looks really, really hard. But shoot and strike and do not quit. You see, you got to quit quitting. And then we need a faith that's bigger than our fears. And faith isn't what you see. You see, in the story of Joash, when he shoots the arrow out the window, that's something you can see. That's like, oh, that makes sense. That doesn't require faith. But the part of the story that required faith was the keep striking the arrows, right? That requires faith. Because you can't see, what is that about God? You see, sometimes God's going to ask you to do things that don't make any sense, right? Sometimes God is going to ask you to keep striking, keep going, don't quit, just don't quit, don't quit. You see, We need to be encouraged in that. You can study Hebrews 11 this week. It would be a great thing for you to study. You see, the kingdom advances through people who won't quit. It advances through people who won't stop. Matthew 11:12 says, since the days of John the Baptist till now, until right now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing through forceful men who lay hold of it, who lead it. That is, people that won't quit, people who shoot and strike and shoot and strike and shoot and strike. Erwin McManus says this in his book, and I think this is really powerful. There is more courage in us than danger ahead of us. You are strong enough for the battles ahead. You're strong enough. So shoot and strike and do not quit. Shoot and strike and do not quit. Shoot and strike and do not quit. Let's pray. Father, help us to be people who hear from you, who walk with you, who have wisdom that comes from you. Who, God, when we get directions from you, even when they don't make sense, that we will do what you've asked us to do, that we will shoot and strike and we will not quit, that we will shoot and strike and we will not quit, that we will be people, God, who honor you enough to bow up under the weight of what you've called us to carry, and that we would be good soldiers in your kingdom. We would be people who would shoot and strike and who would not quit. People who would keep going even when it's tough. People that will fight through the spiritual battles that we're going to face in the season ahead. People that call on you, God, but then also know what our place is in the plan as well. That yes, we know you can deliver us, but often you deliver us through the work you've called us to do. So God, help us to be those who shoot and strike and do not quit. I ask this in the powerful name of Jesus.